History remembers queens as powerful and untouchable figures, women who wore crowns, ruled kingdoms, and stood at the center of power. But the reality is, many of them were used as pawns, married for alliances, controlled by powerful men, and caught in political games that were beyond their control. A crown did not guarantee them power and authority, especially in a world where women were often underestimated. And while some lost everything, others learned how to survive it. Take Marie Antoinette, for example. She was married to secure an alliance between Austria and France. And later, when the country faced an economic crisis, she became the face of public anger. Rumors and propaganda turned her into a target, and she was no longer seen as a legitimate queen, but as a symbol of everything the people resented. She was arrested, put on trial, then executed. So in this case, her crown couldn't protect her from the politics and propaganda around her. But Marie Antoinette was not the only queen who became a victim of politics and propaganda. Some decades earlier in England, Anne Boleyn faced a dangerous fate as well. Anne Boleyn wasn't born a queen. She became one because the king wanted her. King Henry VIII of England broke away from the Catholic Church and annulled his marriage to Catherine of Aragon just to marry her. For a moment, it seemed like Anne held real power and influence, but it all changed when she failed to give a male heir to the king, which, by the way, was the one thing the king desperately wanted. Later on, Anne was accused of adultery, incest, and treason, orchestrated by the king's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. She was arrested and executed in 1536. If you think those two queens had sad stories, wait until you hear about Mary, Queen of Scots. She was born a queen to rule Scotland after she came of age, but due to the unstable politics at that time, she was sent to France at a young age. And from that moment, her life was filled with personal losses, betrayals, and reckless decisions. After returning to Scotland, her rule was anything but stable. Every decision Mary made seemed to pull her deeper into disaster. Scotland turned against her. Her marriages became political scandals, and soon even her own throne was no longer safe. Then, after a major scandal, she was forced to abdicate and fled to England to seek help from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. But instead of finding safety, she was held captive for nearly 19 years before being executed in 1587. Even a queen born to the throne couldn't escape a tragic life. So we got three queens with very different yet tragic lives. But like I said earlier, not all queens ended up losing everything. The most famous example is Queen Elizabeth I of England. From a young age, Elizabeth realized how quickly queens could fall. Unlike her mother Anne Boleyn, she understood how fragile her position was from the moment she became queen. In order to survive in a court filled with political plots and powerful foreign enemies, Elizabeth ruled with care and strategy. Instead of making reckless decisions, she often delayed, negotiated, and carefully calculated her next move. She surrounded herself with trusted advisors and strengthened her authority through diplomacy and careful political alliances. Another important thing is that she refused to let marriage become a weapon against her. Elizabeth remained unmarried and carefully built her image as the Virgin Queen, loyal only to England. All of these combinations have successfully balanced her power in a world dominated by men and led England through the Golden Age. Another impressive example was Isabella I of Castile. Unlike many queens who were expected to simply stand beside their husband, Isabella refused to remain in the background. After marrying Ferdinand II of Aragon, she ruled alongside her husband as an equal and made sure her authority as queen was recognized. Isabella understood that survival in power required more than just a crown. It required control. So she involved herself directly in military campaigns, finances, and political decisions, especially during the conquest of Granada, which became one of the most important victories in Spanish history. While many queens were controlled by the politics around them, Isabella actively shaped the future of her kingdom herself. In 1492, she also sponsored Christopher Columbus' expedition, which led to the discovery of the Americas. The discovery eventually transformed Spain into one of the most powerful empires in the world. So she was not simply remembered as a king's wife, but she became one of the most powerful rulers in Europe herself. Another queen who was, in my opinion, one of the most skilled rulers was Catherine de Medici. She was known as a master of survival and a highly skilled negotiator. Although many of her methods were ruthless and controversial, Catherine managed to maintain the Valois monarchy for nearly 30 years while serving as queen consort, regent, and chief advisor to her sons. At a time when France was deeply divided by religious conflict, Catherine was also the one who handled the rivalries between powerful nobles and helped prevent France from collapsing into chaos. She formed alliances, negotiated between enemies, and adapted quickly to changing political situations. Unlike many queens who became victims of court politics, Catherine understood how to navigate them, and perhaps that was what made her so dangerous yet so effective. Because while other queens were overwhelmed by the political games around them, Catherine de Medici learned how to play them herself. From all the stories we have so far, it's clear that being a queen wasn't just about wearing a crown. Marie Antoinette and Boleyn and Mary Queen of Scots all had power, but it wasn't enough to keep them safe. Politics, public opinion, and ruthless rivals eventually caught up with them and ended their lives in tragedy. Then there were queens who survived, like Elizabeth I, Isabella I of Castile, and Catherine de Medici. They knew how to play the game, when to negotiate, when to adapt, and how to stay in control of their power. And the lesson here? A crown alone doesn't make a queen strong. The real power lies in surviving the throne and knowing how to handle it.